between businesses and its social environment, in parallel to a profit motive. Many companies honestly entertain such concerns. Some are even sufficiently invested to ensure that consistent actions are taken outside the areas usually supervised by the PR department. But overall, many industries, for example, big tobacco, have financial incentives in direct opposition to the social interest. Are most companies actually trying to shift their focus towards sustainability? Or are they only doing what they do to enhance their reputation and meet political pressures? And secondly, is the benefit from CSR a spillover effect due to compliance, or a true reflection of a change towards environmental sustainability in the corporate mindset?
Who's in this group?
One.
Just one person?
There's a couple.
No, there's three of you. Okay. Holly, Matthias? Matthias? Oh.
It's Matthias, that's right.
Matthias. Okay. And Laura. Okay. So, you know what you guys are asking, if I understand you right, is a very fundamental question of, are companies doing this for money and they just dress it up? Or are they doing it because of some other maybe altruistic reason? Is that right?
It's a great way to put it. I think it certainly cuts through to a chase.
Who else would have that question in the group? Is it for money or is it for sincerity? Or for just two other people? I think this is the question that's always on, I think, everybody's mind in civil society. Can you trust a company? And if you guys are in economics, an economic lens would just say it's all about money or about regulation, right? So either you have to force me to do it, or I do it because I can make some money off of it, and corporations wouldn't do it for any other reason. Because ultimately, it's all about profits. It's all about optimization. It's all about self-interest. Agreed? So you can't trust IKEA. You can't trust Patagonia. You can't trust even Starbucks. Agreed? Yeah? And yet, why do they go way above profits? Why are they spending money beyond what they need to do? So why is IKEA taking back some of its old furniture, and they don't need to take that back? Why are they getting rid of, or why are they moving towards a circular economy? So reimagining the materials and the glues and everything that they use so that the furniture can be reused in different ways rather than just having to go to landfill. You have to really think deeply about why this happens. So I'll tell you, there's a couple of ways to think about it. One, what is profits? So actually, that's not a rhetorical question. I want someone in the group to tell me, what is profits? Magda's used to me being provoking, but this is not going to be a quiet class, guys, so get used to the next
Just open up so turn on your mic and start talking. Tima is very helpful in directing the discussion. Just tell what is in your mind. Raise your hand and talk.
Laurent, what's profits?
So of course, having written the question, I had to think a little bit about it myself, and to a certain point, there seems to be a level at which profits being completely directed to demand, completely directly related to how much people are buying of what you're selling, and the fact that most modern companies are moving away from that economics favored perfect competition model of a market wherein you are competing with identical products based on price, and you are instead competing on many other factors with, Apple. It's a lifestyle brand by now. That's what they're trying to do. Well, it seems to be that companies might almost be forced to invest because they are expected to. And it in a way, it creates an extra attribute to the product that differentiates it. Or at least, that leads them not to be differentiated in the negative, not to be the pariah of the industry.
So the industry is sort of expecting it of them, so they can't not do it. And yet, and if they do it and they do it better than others, they can differentiate themselves from others and charge more, right? Mm-hmm. So you're arguing that profits is basically the money that you make selling, less the costs that you have. Agreed? That's what you're saying. And so if I can charge more, I'll make more money. Or if I get pushed out of the marketplace because everybody else is doing it, then I'm screwed, so I better do it. Anybody else have a different view of what profits are? Or maybe even a more complex view, not a different view? It's just revenues minus costs?
Keanu, you can go if you want.
I was just going to say revenues minus costs, but I'm not too sure.
Keanu, good. Okay, so revenues minus costs. Let's ask the question a different way. Revenues over what period of time? How do you determine the length of time? Lauren, I'm not going to go to you quite yet. See if someone else. Sorry, nice try. What period of time, Rowan?
Should I call the names, or anyone wants?
I could just, yeah. If you don't mind, Magdetta, I'll keep them on their toes and cold call every now and then when I see them starting to drift off. Rowan, what do you think? What period of time?
I don't know if I'm answering the question, but I'm going to offer a complex view, like a temporal view, so kind of the same topic. So profit kind of allows whatever entity it is, like a company, to keep existing. So it's kind of the sustainability of whatever entity it is, like it hinges on that.
Okay, so it's not necessarily just 6 months or 1 year. It could be that Apple, which is a great example, is actually looking to be around for a very long time. And so they're not interested in profits this coming year. They're going to make the investments in the technologies that will allow them to stay for a long time. Well, if climate change is on our horizon, well, maybe we should do it. We should make those investments. Now, have you guys seen, I don't even know what it's called, but the building, the Apple building, the Cupertino's headquarters? Do you know what I'm talking about? If no one's nodding, if people aren't nodding, I know that you're not listening. So I can see you all. Who hasn't seen the building? None. Okay, some of you haven't. Google it. It's an amazing headquarters. They didn't need to spend, I can't remember the spend on it, but it was like, I'll be making it up for sure, but I think it was way $800 million, $1 billion. Crazy amount of money. They didn't need to do that. But it affects their profits. As soon as you make that kind of investment in infrastructure, it affects your costs. If it's revenues minus costs, their costs just went up. Why did they do that? It's because they see a longer term future. Why does IKEA do it? Because they see a different time period in how they manage their profits. But we never start to take back the layers about what are profits. We just say firms try to maximize profits. But how firms calculate profits differs. Laurent, go ahead.
Pushback.
Yes.
Corporate time horizons are rarely that long in general investments. What makes it so that it is so different that we should interpret these actions in the context of an investment which may not pay off for decades in terms of the environment?
Okay, you said in terms of the environment at the very end, but why would they make an investment in their building? Lauren, why would they? I'm pushing back on you. It's a dialogue. Sorry, it's not pushback. It's a dialogue. So why would they put so much money into this building?
Well, the building isn't necessarily the best analogy for it. The best analogy might be something like a coffee company going fair trade, something of the sort.
No, you're talking though about the social environmental piece still. Okay. I just want to shift for a moment. We'll come back to that. Okay. What about the non-social environmental pieces? Why do they make those investments?
it's certainly a long-term asset. It's an asset that gains in value, which begs a question, which you can certainly answer me. Is there an equivalent in the environmental aspect? Is there a long-term asset that is being invested in that way?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the environmental commitments are long-term commitments. And arguably, okay, I'm going to go back to their building. Part of the reason why their building costs so much is that they put, I think it's zero emissions, that has light everywhere. So there's all sorts of architectural advancements that they made in this building that they didn't need to, that cost money. So then the question is, why do they do that? Well, they do that for happy employees. They can get better employees. They can always frame things as an economic benefit in the end. Who's Googling the building right now? Yeah, so some of you are actually listening and Googling the building is pretty awesome, right? So then they make these investments, and what we tend to do is, one, not see an environmental investment as an investment per se, and it does require a longer time horizon. Yet companies are always investing in technology. So, when you look at the oil sands in Canada, they're invested in steam-assisted gravity extraction of oil. Well, that's a technology that means it's cheaper to extract oil in the end, but it requires an investment. That's true with almost every environmental technology as well, is that it could lower costs, it improves reputation. That's one thing, and that's a long-term decision. But what we don't do enough of is to recognize the investments made in people. So when we have happy employees, we get, they stay longer, we recruit better, they're more productive, but the social infrastructure is often missing in our analysis. So I'm going to go back to what is profits. The time frame of profits tends to vary by company by company. And I can tell you some of the technology companies are lucky to have a 6-month horizon because they see things changing so fast. Others are making these huge investments into the future, right? Why in the world did Tesla want to invest in SpaceX? Well, it's because they saw opportunities. Economic models aren't very good at peeling back those layers. And so partly because we just take profits as given. But in a business school, we start to say, okay, well, we need to think about profits in a much wider way because optimizing profits, there's no single way of seeing that. What other piece of it, though? So now I've given you the economic analysis, that what's revenues and what's costs are part of the issue. But the second part is, do you think that companies ever do things just because it's the right thing to do? Anybody but Laura to answer the question. Matthias, and oh, here we go. Shenzi, do companies ever do anything because they should?
Yes, I think companies can do the right thing if they should. But so this is just a personal anecdote more so. But from what I remember is that, well, my uncle owned a smaller company, right? And he would do things like pay his employees above the minimum wage or what he had to pay. And he would like give them more benefits than he was legally obligated to give them. But it also hampered his expansion, right? Because it cost him more money to do those things that he should have been doing morally, but he didn't have a legal obligation to do. So what I'm wondering is if your company is struggling on the verge of survival, or if they're having a difficult time, then obviously they're going to be less inclined to do these things that are morally correct, but may cost them extra or lower their profits a bit. So what I'm saying is, I think companies will do the moral thing if they can afford to do it, which is, sorry, I'm going to end that thought there, but.
No, and your point's actually fantastic. I do think that there is a boundary condition on this, and that has to do with if you're just like barely surviving. So that's a special condition around which we have to put a box around. But let's say you're doing more than just surviving, that it's an ongoing concern. That's a going concern. And you're saying did you say your father? Your father? No,
my uncle. My uncle.
Your uncle paid more than you need to. So I'm going to keep going on that. I'm going to get some other voices in here. Umer, where'd Umer go?
Yeah. If the question was, do companies ever do more than like they have to? I was just thinking of like not for profits and like legal clinics and stuff like that, or like, you know, they have like for example, like legal clinics might have like bonuses capped off on like certain cases, like if they win it, but like, you know, like they don't make as much as they possibly could, but just try to help people out.
But that's
like
a not-for-profit, right? So in a not-for-profit, they have to do what's good for the world.
That's true.
They're not about profit. Yeah.
That was, I was trying to get a cheeky answer in there, but
nice try. But fair enough. But for-profit firms, will they ever compromise their profits in order to do the right thing? So Shenzi provided an example. Rowan, keep going.
I guess legally, can they even do that? Like, I don't know, but
So I just shot a bullet into this notion of profit. So I could say, yeah, I plan on making money. Shenzi's uncle's going to make money, not this year, but in 2 years from now.
So I guess unless it's, from what I know, I guess, unless it's profitable, it doesn't matter that it's the right thing. You can't do it. I guess you have responsibilities as a firm. So, like, if it's not for profit, like if your goal is profit and it doesn't coincide with doing the right thing, you can't do the right thing. In a sense,
what I'm saying is that we can often build a narrative that we want around profits. Profits is a construct. Profits isn't a fact. Profits are not carbon, that we all agree on what carbon is, or profits aren't, trees and the whatever it might be. It's not something real. It's something we've made up, and I can draw a narrative around what profits are. Mac, tell me, what do you think?
So I think that it has a lot to do with scale. I think when you think about small businesses, it's a lot more. Profit can be defined not only just as the profit of the business and raw money income, but also the enjoyment, other things that you get out of the profit from the business yourself. So if you have an aspect of altruism, you can certainly invest a portion of your profits, so long as you can still sustain yourself, into something that's more environmentally friendly, any kind of real social responsibility, without really having a lot of forethought about the continuity of your business. I know it has to be there, but I think that in a small business, you're a lot more likely to see somebody take that kind of blind jump. Whereas in corporate business and a large scale, if you have shareholders, if you are reliant on investors' money and stuff, you cannot just, because it's so fluid, you can't just cut into your profits without seeing necessary repercussions for that. So I think that there has to be a lot more thought and analysis put into it on the larger scale, which makes me think that it can't just be done for the good of it. It has to be done for the continuity of the business in itself and the continuity of profits as a money motive, so that you can secure investors, so that you can keep going in the future.
So fair enough that, and I think the point that you're inadvertently or maybe sort of circling around is this idea of who owns you. So ownership matters. And if it's a publicly traded company, you have more constraints than if it's a privately held company, right? And so Shenzi's uncle owns the company, so he can make whatever decisions that he wants. When you have shareholders, they're going to be watching over you. And if you don't make it, if there's extra money to be made, you're at risk of being bought out or going through a shareholder resolution of some sort. Fair enough. Good. Jackson.
I just want to kind of build off what Mac was saying and relate it back to the earlier discussion about profits and timelines. I think when you look at larger firms that are relying on shareholders, any kind of the altruism has to be rooted in some kind of future like future profit expansion or hedging against future costs. Like if a firm wants to become more environmentally friendly and reduce their carbon emissions, they have to somehow relate it to, but the shareholders will be fine with spending this money now because we expect carbon taxes or other things to rise in the future. And so we need to, if we make this investment now, it will actually pay off long term. And just, we might not have profits in this quarter, but it'll make us profits over its like lifetime of the investment.
I don't know if what Meg Dad said about my background, but I actually did a master's degree in economics here a long time ago. And so I sort of have this economics thinking in the background. And then I go into a business school. And the question is, what's the difference between a business school and economics, whatever program? And the difference is, in some ways, arguably, it's a level of analysis. And so you guys in economics look at things at a very macro level of analysis. And when you do that, you tend to overlook the differences. And I don't know, some of the pieces, some of the insights that you can gain when you have a more microscopic view, when you lower the level of analysis. And so it's sort of like seeing an army of ants, and they build anthills, and all you see is the anthills, and they look like they have order, right? So you can predict where ants would go, sort of thing, and there's a degree to which there's patterns. But once you dig into individual ant behavior, you start to see various differences that change your whole perspective of ant colonies. And that's what we do in business schools, that we start to see that the narratives and the behaviors at some macro level look like they're patterned, but at the more micro level or organizational level, there's differences that we need to peel apart. And so you're right that from an economics perspective, Jackson, it's really easy to say that you can cast this narrative that I just have to say it's about future earnings or future costs, it's future regulations, it's future competition. That is that pattern that we expect to see at a macro level. When you drill down into the micro level, and Shenzi starts to talk about his uncle, he says, my uncle is paying more. He didn't need to do that. He's not making as much money. He can't buy maybe as big a house as he wanted. And you start to see that the narratives really change. Once you start talking to the executives that run these businesses, and they're making the day-to-day decisions, their narrative shifts completely. And you look at the CEO of Patagonia, and they have something on their website that says, don't buy this jacket, thinking, that's not what a company should be doing. And then you realize that the woman who's running Patagonia has got this long interest in the environment and thinking really hard about the longevity of the stuff they're selling. And that they're now built a new business that allows them to repair clothes. So you send back your clothes to get them repaired. Is that because she doesn't want to see the clothes go into landfill? Or is that because she sees a revenue stream when people send back their clothes to have them repaired? You could cast either type of argument against that. And I think that there's more latitude that CEOs or owners of SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, have than what we realize. So step back, you see an anthill, and it looks like every ant is following lockstep. Dig down, you have agency. And that agency says that, and that's why we have, agency theory or moral hazard or whatever it is that you guys would be learning, is that people have the ability to do what they want. And it's a lot easier to do what you want than you think. And when I started my economics program, it was all about, Milton Friedman and profits and business is business, right? And governments need to regulate. To now us realizing that managers do what they want to do, and there's a lot of latitude for that. And Tesla, you tell me that Elon Musk isn't doing what he wants to do? I wouldn't believe you for a moment. He's doing what he wants to do. Jeff Bezos, he wants to rule the world. There is no question. He's the largest, he's what, the wealthiest? He was the wealthiest. Forget now who just surpassed him. So, someone knows?
Elon Musk passed.
Elon Musk, that's right. Until recently, because the blockchain, whatever, orientation purchases tanked the stock price a bit. There's a lot more at that different level of analysis than you realize. So going back now, sorry, Laurent, it's taken me quite a while to get there, but I'm going to say basically that do firms do the right things for altruism versus just for money? I think that there's a bit of both. And corporate social responsibility shouldn't just be framed as an economic equation. And that we are seeing a shift in what corporations are doing. I don't know if you know this, but Microsoft announced July 2020 that they would be net carbon negative. Net carbon negative, not net carbon zero. They only needed to be net carbon zero. Here is one of the largest companies in the world. It's in the S&P 20, I think, or something like that. One of the 20 largest traded companies in the S&P index. They are removing carbon from the atmosphere, and they will have eliminated their legacy carbon emissions since the day they were formed by 2040 or something like that. That's not profitable. They don't need to put up trees and buy forests and build new factories or have new technologies and retire old technologies. They don't need to do that. It's a matter of choice. It's a publicly traded company. We have choice. That gives me hope. That really does give me hope that we can change things. Because if economics rule the world, we're in just serious trouble. Boy, did I just use 30 minutes? Sorry, Magdad and Matthias, Holly, and Laurent. Thank you for your great question, but it was 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Magdad, next question, I guess.
The next question, would be, let me find question 2.
What I'm trying to do is seduce some of you to consider business schools as if you decide to go into research, you know that. Go ahead, Magda.
So basically during your talk, some of these questions are already we touched those questions right now, but group 11, maybe you want to ask your question.
And raise your hand if you're group 11 so I get to see a whole group. Nicholas, that's it? Catherine? Okay, Vanessa, go ahead. Who's asking the question?
I can ask it. Okay, well, I'm just grabbing it. Okay, so in your paper, you discussed studies which compared corporate social performance and corporate financial performance. A majority of the studies found a positive relationship between social performance and financial performance. This relationship, it allows the argument for strategy researchers to pitch the idea that both responsibility and sustainability as a long-term strategy is a wise pursuit because it demonstrates lucrative incentives. However, you identify that this accelerates the conceptual convergence between sustainability and responsibility. So my question was, what do you think are some of the most critical differences between responsibility and sustainability that often get blurred when firms try to meet short-term demands? And how can the convergence be reduced or avoided to ensure that this does not interfere with the success of a long-term green strategy?
Oh, that's a big one.
Yeah.
So I'm making the argument in the paper that corporate social responsibility, just the word responsibility, is about what you should do, right? Arguably, it's about religion. So you shall, did I say your name right? You shall? You shall, you should go, you should be nice to your mother. You should be respectful to your mother, right? That's my belief, that you should be nice to your mother. It's my belief that you need to make lots of money. You should make lots of money. It's my belief, right? And responsibility is about your responsibility to something. And so it often is just about beliefs and values. And it has a sort of religious, I don't mean religious as in a certain big R religion, right? I'm just talking about a certain normative stance. Then there's sustainability, which is just about systems. Actually, you don't need to get into that, but it's about science. We can actually say that systems are being disrupted, and they're being disrupted because of these scientific principles. So if you shall isn't respectful to her mother, then, and every child is not respectful to their parents, then the system will be disrupted for these reasons. Doesn't say what they should do, it's a description. So sustainability would say climate is changing. We know that. That's a fact. Maybe some people in this room could dispute it, but it is a scientific fact that science is changing. So if climate is changing, I am not saying it's good or bad as a sustainability person. I'm just saying it's changing. A responsibility person would say, that's not good, because some people are going to really lose out. So you can see it's a very different set of analysis that one would use. So what happens, though, is that if you take a responsibility lens far into the future, you would say, okay, I should probably start with the sustainability lens. If you take a sustainability lens far into the future, you say climate is changing, and all I'm doing is just describing that climate is changing. But we reach a tipping point that if we change climate too much, all of life will be lost. We can say it doesn't matter, but that means that all of us will die. It's an existential threat. My husband just actually told me the Supreme Court of Canada has just said that climate change is an existential threat. So that was just reported today. Okay, so then the sustainability people would say we're not sustaining development and life. And so we get into this place of, it's not normative, it's descriptive, but it doesn't fit with what we perceive to be the definition of sustainable development, saying that future generations should be able to live like present generations. Responsibility says long-term future. It's not a good thing that people die. So it's a normative stand. And this gets to your point, Nicholas, or question, that in the long-term future, the two converge. In the long-term future, we won't make money. And so social performance and financial performance converge. I don't know if I explained that well, but in the short-term future, it becomes more normative.
Mm.
And really, you should, on the sustainability side, you can talk about whether you make money or not. Probably be more of an economic lens. On the responsibility side, you say you should just do the right thing, even if you don't make money. And that's where Milton Friedman's perspective of, his 1972 or one article was companies should be trying to make as much money as possible. And if they don't, they're doing the morally wrong thing. But a sustainability person would be much more analytical.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thanks, Nicholas, Catherine, and Vanessa, was it? Yeah.
Right. Can I ask Group 7 to introduce themselves and ask their question, please?
And who's in Group 7? Yabin. Who else? Gibby. Giat. Anybody else? Just two? Just two of you.
Okay.
Who's the third one? Sorry, I don't see her.
Who's the third one? In Group 7, it's Jad, Yabin, and Yahu.
Okay. Okay, go ahead, Yabin.
Yeah, basically, our question is we are wondering, just due to the complex agency problem and the potential conflict, like the stakeholder bring, would management decisions still be a reliable fundamental for on the normative order in a numerical application? Like in the other words, like based on the different business purpose across like the corporations, would there possible exist an objective and reliable like the machines regarding the corporation sustainability for managers to follow?
I'm sorry, Yevon, I'm not sure if I fully understood the question.
Yeah.
Try again in your own words, maybe.
Okay, yeah, like just like so after rereading the article, like due to the complex like the for the agency problem and like maybe there is some potential conflict that's like the stakeholder bring, like we are wondering like if the management decision still be a reliable fundamental for the normative order, and like based on the different business purpose across the corporation, like because like different firms may like for like they have different goals, like would there still possible exist an objective and reliable like to approach that regarding the corporation sustainable for for all the managers to follow? Is that
I'm going to repeat back what I think could be the question that you're asking. You're saying, you're asking, if one has an agency perspective, then you know that we have the principal, which is the shareholder, the owner, and we have the agent, and it's quite clear that the agent needs to report to the principal, and so the principal agent problem is a disconnect between what the agent wants to do and what the principal wants to do.
Yeah.
And when you have a stakeholder perspective, there's many actors to whom you have to report, and that becomes problematic. What you're asking?
Yeah, exactly.
So how does a manager or a CEO report to many stakeholders when on the shareholders should have primacy? Yeah, is that what you're saying?
Oh, yeah, like, yeah, like, yeah, I think like, yeah, basically.
Let me just, I'll try to answer around this. If I don't answer it, you jump in. I'm going to ask the group. Okay, so listen carefully. Even those of you who aren't listening right now, I want you to listen. I want you to put your hands up. You're now citizens of the world. You're not economic students, okay? Do you want businesses to just worry about profits? Or do you want the businesses in your community to also care about your community? Who thinks that they should also care about the community? Okay. Who says just profits? Laura, I think that your hand is not up for that question, right? Okay. I just want to say that I assume that everyone here was listening, and most of you, all of you, put your hands up that you think that businesses are here for the community, at least as much so as for profits. Shenzi, I saw your hand, but Laurent has his hand up first, so let me get to him and I'll come to you. Laurent?
I was going to say that I absolutely support the idea of businesses being their community. I mean, first of all, businesses emerge out of the community. They don't exist in this isolated economic space outside of social concerns, of culture, externalities, politics, and just community in general. If we try to isolate business from the community, then we end up with a sort of business, with a sort of decisions which only reflect economic and very short-term, sometimes economic imperatives, rather than recognizing the longer-term community goal. And if we can convince businesses to recognize this their place in the community. If we can build towards, I mean, an older French model, for example. I'm not suggesting practical control of companies by the state, but if we can push towards a recognition that companies should regulate their own externalities to a certain level, should recognize their own externalities rather than force government to impose it upon them, we can maybe approach an even more efficient overall system.
Do you have a French flag behind you?
Yes.
What's that about?
That is, I just came out of a class, which it was climate negotiations. We just agreed to a new Paris Accord in 2015, and with Professor Dimitrov.
Okay, and you're representing France.
Very much so.
A new Paris Accord for 2015. That's cool. Oh, we lost France there. All right, so Shenzi, I want to hear what you have to say, and I'll keep going after that.
Yeah, well, I think Laurent illustrated the point very eloquently. That I also wanted to touch on a bit, like the development of business and community, like Laurent said, shouldn't be in isolation. And as a business takes care of its community, it also grows said community, right? And for a business to consider the long-term prospects of existing, well, it has to have a base of existence to build its operations upon, which is where taking care of the community and I guess the society around it as a whole comes in. So if a business is more concerned with the long-term prospects of its survival and prosperity, I think it has to take care of the community because it has to foster growth, so it has a base to grow itself off of.
Wow, you two don't sound like economics students. I can see why Laurent just negotiated a new climate accord.
Double major.
What's that?
Double major with policy sci.
Interesting. So both Shenzi and Laurent says businesses are born out of the community, so therefore they have to report back to the community. Shenzi says, well, if they do good for the community is stronger, and so that it becomes this positive feedback loop, and so that means that the business gets stronger. Why the heck do we have a principal agent problem? Why do we have agency theory as one of the key theories within economics? Because really, you guys in this room all think that businesses should take care of the community. And yet economics says that businesses should care only about shareholders. Elliot.
I think we could support what you just said if you looked at the incentives firms have to make profits. If their employees are happier, their employees will be more productive, presumably, and they'll produce more and they'll make more profits. Or if they give back to their community, more people will come and buy their products and they'll make more profits. So I think you could often, maybe not always, but you can often find an incentive that influences that decision to make more profits.
Right, but you just gave me a different narrative. And I could give you a similar narrative that if I put my toxins down the street gutter, I could make more money because I don't have to deal with my waste responsibly.
Yeah, and a lot of companies do that.
So that basically it becomes a fiction or a narrative or whatever we want to tell, the story that we want to tell. And so we haven't really given guidance. It's really fascinating that there's this profit motive, and yet when we act as individuals, prefer a community motive for corporations because we see the positive feedback loop. And yet a lot of companies just stick to narrow profits, right? Elliot, go ahead.
I don't think that community benefit has to necessarily be your local book or record store fostering a sense of community by getting people together around a certain thing. It could also be like McDonald's providing a product. I mean, it's a multinational corporation. I'm not saying that it's like exactly giving positive benefits to the communities that they're in, but you could argue that McDonald's around the world are serving a global community. You could say that. It's
I'm going to come back to you on that one. I think that's a really interesting point that you're making. Jackson.
I think the agency problem comes from the fact that very few firms start up just on their own. There's often shareholders or like equity funds are either raised through equity, debt, other means. And so to exist and be competitive, those investments need to attract investors. And most investors, although there's been a shift recently in terms of in moral, I don't really know.
Impact investing and ESG investing. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Most of the large investors are not. They're simply caring about, they're trying to be responsible for their shareholders. And so I think that's where the agency problem comes in, because although a firm owner might want to give back, it's kind of like a game theoretical type thing where the owner might be doing, say, certain actions, but sees opportunity to do more. However, the owner doesn't want to fully commit to investing and being good for the community, because it will lower the business's profits and make the business less attractive to potential investors, which will drive it out and leave room for a competitor that might not even be doing the 20% good. And so it's better to lock in the 20% instead of trying to increase the potential good, because increasing the potential good increases the likelihood of being driven out of the market. And so it's kind of risk hedging. And then going back to the idea of why don't firms just dump sewage? It's because that's damaging both on reputation and potential fines.
No one knows. No one knows. I just put all my toxins down the sewer.
But we've seen in recent years that investigations have exposed that, and the backlash on those companies is damaging, both in terms of their like marketability, but also like government regulations and fines associated with it. And so,
companies make money off of selling tobacco, which is killing people. We know it. Companies make money off of, any kind of disaster. BP's Horizon oil spill, they recovered from that financially. Doesn't matter.
selling tobacco, in my opinion, is different though, because Philip Morris sells tobacco. That's what they do. It's what they do. They're not.
They're selling cancer, though, are they not?
Yeah, but they're selling tobacco, and I think at this point, it's kind of a generational gap thing. I think for many of us here, tobacco's always been associated with the damage, and so if you're a tobacco selling company, you're making a market, but it's kind of just assume that yes, there's negative health repercussions, but they're catering to demand. I think when firms go against environmental regulations, it's different because there's no demand for the damages. They're just inflicting damages on a community. Whereas, like a tobacco company, is anybody buying their products is accepting that risk.
So, by the way, I'm being intentionally provocative. I hope this is really clear, and there's no way in an hour and a half I have with you that I could impart a clear framework around how to think about it. But I hope provocation gets you to see the depth of the questions that are in front of you and the difficulty of finding answers, because there's no clear answers. But I'm just going to retort one way with Jackson. So I've just got a new column for Forbes, and the article I was going to write this morning was on J&J. So Johnson & Johnson's vaccine, COVID vaccine, they're selling it for $10 a shot. Their vaccine only requires one shot. Pfizer's requires 2. Moderna's requires 2 shots as well. So $10 for J&J, $39 for Pfizer, $30 for Moderna. Why is J&J giving it out so cheap? J&J is a good company, right? They're doing the right thing. No. I could make another alternative argument. This is where I'm going, Jackson, with this one, is that J&J made a huge amount of money off of opioids and off of talcum powder, which was known to have asbestos in it. And they knew that there was asbestos in the talcum powder, but they still fought it all the way. They knew that people were highly addicted to opioids, and they still fought to they still provided opioids. So companies will do what they need to do to make money, and if it saves them costs, right? So if it's part of their revenue structure. So Philip Morris sells tobacco because it can sell tobacco and make money. And sure, there's a generational gap, but there's lots of people who are now addicted, and that's how they're making money. I think it's really a tricky question, because if money, I'm going to go back to the agency problem. Actually, before I go back to the agency problem, I just want to go back to Elliot's point. Walmart is another company that just makes money off of selling stuff, right? And the more stuff it provides a service, sort of like McDonald's provides a service, Walmart provides a service. But the more stuff that Walmart sells, the more money it makes. The more stuff that Amazon sells, the more money Amazon makes, right? Where is that? If it's only about profits in the end, and the agency problem is only to do with a principal, which is a stockholder, then the company has no obligation to the community, other than if there's an outside arbiter, like the government, that forces companies to internalize the externalities. So otherwise, a company will do whatever they want to do, but we know that governments are imperfect. That's a longer discussion. If governments are imperfect, then inevitably there's always that wiggle room for companies to do what they want to do. And if J&J can go to court and say, it's okay to sell opioids, it's okay to put asbestos in, and I can go like this and pretend I didn't see that there was asbestos in my talcum powder, and women are getting cancer because of the use of talcum powder. Who really owns this concern for the community? Economics cannot answer that question, because ultimately it's a hammer that they expect to use. That's called regulation, or that's called government. But corporations, and this is important, are stepping up in ways that we could not have predicted through economic models. They're stepping up the last 18 months to commit to net carbon zero. I'm sure you can say it's future regulations. It doesn't make sense for these major corporations to step up. And that's because at net carbon zero, one, somebody made the argument already, but if they don't do it, they're screwed. But also they see what's in front, and they see the failures of government. And so if the Paris Accord says that we're going to become net carbon zero, or we're going to cap emissions so that it's only 2 degrees, and governments can't do it. They need corporations to do it. And now it's up to the responsibility of the CEOs to do it. And they're doing it. I don't know if economics has the tools. And yet these CEOs are still doing it. There is so much to know about individual behavior, corporate behavior, that we've not really unpacked. And agency theory is a good model at a very macro level, but cannot help us understand individual behavior, nor will it ensure or assure the sustainability of humans. And yet, economics was built to create wealth, and we've done it so well that we have now consumed the resources of the world. So now we need governments to act, but like I said, governments are imperfect. Laurent is studying that, so we know that governments cannot always act as we want them to do. That's my soapbox for a few moments. Matt, go to you.
We're kind of far from a couple of things that I wanted to get on, but one of the points that I just wanted to say first, and then the other. In regards to Johnson & Johnson, could the price not simply be explained in the fact that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is a simple DNA vaccine versus the 2 Pfizer and Moderna ones are mRNA. There's a lot more novel research that went into them, and a lot more. I don't know the exact investments, but they differ already in their structure, and it's clear that the 2 mRNAs are priced much higher. I think that was just a point that I wanted to say. I don't really think that there was a question in there.
Can I just quickly respond with a question, though? And you don't have to respond to the question, but then if the other vaccines are selling for $30 and $39, and they're also more expensive to administer, then why doesn't Johnson & Johnson just charge $30? So, and it's a rhetorical question, but anyway, they could. So it's not cost-based pricing; it's demand-based pricing. But go ahead.
And then my second point was that I just almost don't buy the commitment from Microsoft. I can't remember whether it was a recent episode or a past episode, and I tried Googling also in this time, but there was a recent episode of John Oliver talking about Coca-Cola's commitment to sustainability, how X number of their bottles were going to be fully repurposed within the next X amount of years. And that's great. They can say it back in 2010 to have a commitment for 2020. And that's great. Everyone goes, wow, Coca-Cola is doing great for the environment. I feel less bad about drinking my Coke. And then 2020 comes and the promise isn't made, and there's just no penalty. There's no repercussions because it was an internally determined thing that has no whatever. If they were able to commit, if they made that commitment and they were able to do it because of good motive, they would have done it. I just don't believe I don't think they got there because they found out that it was too costly and it was too damaging to profits for them to actually reach it. And they knew that when 2020 came, there's just no penalty.
I love it. I got Shinzi and then Elliot, but I want to respond first to Mac's point about Coca-Cola. It's a wonderful point. So there's authentic and there's inauthentic commitments. And once you get into the granularity of the analysis, you start to see differences. And it's quite clear. And one thing I did for fun, one of the things that I study is time. So I think it's short-termism that's causing a lot of the problems in the world. Is companies don't really think seriously about time. And the companies that think more seriously about time have more authentic commitments to sustainability. Okay. You can talk about First Nations, Indigenous people that talk about 7 generations, and they steward the land because they know that's for 7 generations. So I did a study on Coca-Cola and Pepsi, and I tried to look at the temporalities of the 2 companies. And I looked at things like CEO turnover, stock price, share turnover, new product introductions, M&A, mergers and acquisitions, new joint ventures. So just how fast the companies were doing, how many accidents that they had. And it was so clear that Coca-Cola was going super fast and they were short term. And you look at Pepsi, and Pepsi was making long-term investments and moving out of some of the cola products and trying to get into healthier products and trying to change their packaging. So they were making really quite different decisions. And you look at their CEOs even. You saw Coca-Cola had huge EDI issues, so diversity issues, right? So they had very few people of color. And you saw PepsiCo, the CEO is Inder Nui, who's a woman, an Indian woman who was running the company and was part of the WHO at one point. I think it's WHO. World Health Organization is a major food NGO. Anyway, see 2 different companies run in 2 different ways, 2 companies that can be more similar to each other. So Mac, I absolutely agree with you that there's authentic and inauthentic, and John Oliver picked a good one to point at. So you're going to say something else.
So I guess I would even call myself a pessimist. Out of this authentic and inauthentic, do we not just create a market for lemons where commitment from inauthentic can be anything they so want, as long as it makes the consumer feel good today. In which case, how do we discern between the authentic and inauthentic, and give back legitimacy to commitments?
Oh, fantastic question. Yeah. I don't know how we easily discern, but certainly I've been at this for a while, and I can tell you that I feel like sometimes I can discern. And corporations are complex creatures. I'm going to tell you a story. So how did I get into sustainability in the first place? And I'd done my master's degree here in the economics department at Western. And then I worked for 7 years. I worked as an economist for 4 years, and I went into management consulting for 3 years. And I thought, I want to do a business degree. So I went to Oxford to do a master's degree. And at that time, it still is, Oxford, though, tends to be very tutorial oriented. So you sort of pick your own topics and you do your own thing. And I thought, why would firms commit to the environment? Well, it doesn't make money half the time. And so I started to study various industries. One of them was oil and gas. I looked at Shell. And the issue that I found most interesting with Shell was, here was a company that was really trying to do the right thing. So when I dug into it, I talked to managers at Shell, you could see that they had an awareness relative to Exxon. They were Imperial Oil. They were just like completely two different companies. Shell's trying to do the right thing, and yet they had at that time trying to sink an oil tanker in the North Sea, that instead of taking it back and recommissioning the oil platform, and that gave them a lot of bad press. But the issue that really caught me, so listen to this one, is that they also have a facility in Nigeria. Nigeria is in the Niger Delta. That's where they extract a lot of oil, because there's just a lot of fossil fuels that turned in. Historically, it just has a lot of fossil fuels. They're cheap and easy to extract, but it's on indigenous lands. And so the indigenous people, the Ogoni people in Nigeria, had decided that they were going to protest Shell being there. And so they did relatively peaceful protests. But at some point, the military government decides to arrest 7 of them. Now, these are native people. All they're trying to do is say, we don't want Shell to pollute our land anymore. And you could take a match and just put it onto their agricultural land, and it would ignite. So Shell wasn't showing responsibility. But the military government arrests these 7 people. I'm a doctoral student at the University of Oxford at this point, believing that Shell was trying to do the right thing. This is the authentic commitment. And then one day I go into my common room, pick up the Guardian newspaper. And on the front page of the Guardian newspaper are the Ogoni 7 who have been hanged. And I could not figure out why 7 indigenous people, for protecting their land, were hanged for a company that's trying to do the right thing. But Shell did not speak up to protect these people. And I didn't understand. Of course, as a government, they hanged them, not Shell. But Shell could have tried to protect them or try to stop it. That was a puzzle in my mind. That started me on this pathway to understand sustainable development and why good companies do bad things, and can you believe what they say? And it's a powerful experience, because then you realize that companies are super complex, and Shell Nigeria is one part of a major conglomerate. And what they might be doing in the headquarters in the Netherlands and the UK is not necessarily what they do in Shell in Nigeria. And so one has to be really careful when they say, is it authentic? Because it's just really hard to organize. The economics department at Western may be the best department worldwide, economics department or whatever in Canada. But I'll tell you, if you look at another department, fine arts, let's say, or something, they may not be the best. And the president of the Western University cannot tell fine arts and economics, like they're just different. So corporations are really complex, and understanding how to make them comply to a higher standard is where we start to see things change. I don't know, Mac, if I've answered. I've sort of skirted around what you've said, asked around.
I don't think there is an answer, but I think you gave a good example about discerning and how difficult it really is. A good example, though, is often seen as it's a publicly held company that has made some long-term commitments that's hard to achieve, and they're not achieving them all, but they at least put their laundry out there, dirty laundry, and say, this is where we've done well, this is where we need to do more. Sorry, and we'll keep trying. So it's tough, but as you start to peel back the layers, you start to see the difference between Pepsi and Coke, and between Suncor and Shell versus Exxon. So they're vastly different. Shenzi.
I to be honest, I don't remember my point from earlier.
Oh, I'm sorry. My husband says the same thing all the time. He says, "Stop talking so I can remember." If you remember, let me know. Who else? My dad's left the room. So, Elliot?
Yeah, it was just to add on to Mac's point, I think you talked about it a little bit, is how do we know when these things are authentic? How do we know when companies are acting in good faith? And I really don't think we can know. You mentioned Coca-Cola, and Coca-Cola it's owned by Nestle, right? Or is it a totally different company? No? Okay. I'm an economics student. Okay, so let's say Nestle. Nestle is taking water from many African countries and bottling it and selling it in North America, for example.
Or they're taking it from Guelph. It's the same issue in Canada that they're taking the water. Yeah.
Right, and it's because the regulations aren't the same in those countries, I think, and they know they can get away with it there. And so there you kind of like, if they're acting that way in those countries and they're making commitments in Canada because that appeals to Canadian consumers, then how do you know that any of their actions are authentic? If they're acting on two different sets of, I guess, moral standards in two different countries, like you can't even refer to them as moral entities because they don't have their own morals. They're just relying on other entities' morals that they impose on them, I guess.
And that comes back to that profit motive. I do think that there is a paradigm, arguably the paradigm that evolved in the 60s, 70s, 80s, that still dominate the business discourse. And I assume the economics discourse, but I have fallen away from that. But that it's all about profits. But it's starting to shift. And you can see the shift. I've done another project. This is with the sociologists, mind you, but where we look at basically the purpose of organizations over time. And this is back to the 1980s is where we started data collection, to the late 2000 teens, right? And in about 2000, you really start to see a shift away from profitability as being the major part of the discourse to being something else around CSR. And why do we see that shift? Sorry, how do we know that there's been a shift? Is because CEOs are dismissed for various reasons. But up until about the 2000s, they were dismissed on if they try, this is the agency problem, if they try to diversify too much, or is diversification and growth? No, downsizing. Diversification, downsizing. So if they were more likely to be dismissed if they didn't keep their business focus, so if they diversified, and they're more likely to be dismissed if they didn't downsize. In the 2000s, the opposite happens. They're more likely to be dismissed if they were too focused and if they downsized. And that shift is really interesting. Plus, the CSR starts to kick in as well. So they're more likely to be dismissed if they're not responsible. There's a real shift in the discourse. We have such a long ways to go, but the Business Roundtable in the US, which has 196, I think, CEOs of the major companies that you would all know, they said in 2000, and I think it was 18, before it was all about the shareholder, in 2018, they had a new statement that said that businesses are about stakeholders. So it was a shift. But then you can still look at any one of those companies, and a lot of them, JP Morgan is among them, and yet they say it's about stakeholders, but they still cater to stockholders. But I think that the dialogue's changing now. And so have we changed in business schools what we teach? Not too much. Have you changed in economics what you teach? I don't know. But we need to keep up with where companies are, because arguably they might be even ahead of our curriculum. Shenzi, you remembered your question, but have you forgotten it again?
No, I just wanted to say something in response to Elliot's point, because I thought it was pretty interesting. It's, as we were discussing earlier, companies they're complex, they're multifaceted, right? Like, think about how, like, you as a person would talk. Like, would you speak the same way to your grandmother versus your best friend? Like, I mean, if a company that example applies, I think, for Nestle as an example. Like, I don't want to justify their behavior or anything like that, but it's just you change what aspect you are to face the circumstance you're in. And obviously, if you're with someone with moral standards different from yours, you would adapt your behaviors to, like, accommodate their moral standards, right? So I guess I'm just trying to tie that point in back with the point about companies being complex entities. Like, you wouldn't hold, or like, Shell Nigeria obviously is, what they do in that region would not necessarily be what Shell in the Netherlands and the UK would be doing, because it's a multifaceted entity. You can't hold every aspect of it to the same standard, because they operate in regions with different standards. And I don't think that should be an excuse for bad behavior, but I also think that's an explanation for it.
Rowan, are you going to respond to that?
I think I have a counter argument. I sort of see the values we're striving for as universal. Like, I doubt people in Nigeria would like to deal with hotter climate. And I feel like especially like when you think about Elon Musk, like saying, oh, we'll coup whoever we want. So that's a person who's developing like clean cars, clean energy and electric vehicles, but then turning around and saying that he can coup whoever he wants. So that suggests that the people he would coup to get what he wants, let's say, have similar moral values as us. They don't want their resources extracted. They don't want mining to happen in their backyard. So I don't know if that's necessarily true. Like, it differs in regions, I guess. I don't know if I understood it properly, though. Might be jumping the gun.
Shenzi, did you want to respond?
Yeah, I guess the one response I would give is a very pessimistic and or cynical view, is that the reality is, in some regions, what the people want isn't endorsed by the governing body or whoever is in charge of that region. So I think that is a bigger issue that is beyond the scope of what a company's actions in the region are. And solving something like that would be, I assume, more political in nature rather than the scope of this discussion, which is a company's responsibilities.
I just want to say, I think that another issue recognized in my economics training is ancient, but that a limitation in a lot of modeling is that there are no limits. It's an open system. And so when you optimize, there is no way to say that that's the edge of the optimization, right? So that then it becomes a trade-off. So it's almost like you can grow the pie as big as you want. So if you grow your money supply, if you lower your interest rates, if you extract resources, it's endless. Once you start to put a cap on things and say there's a limited amount of resources, our models would change considerably. And we don't know how to deal with that, but that would mean basically when Cali consumes more, I get less. When Cali starts to pollute in my backyard, I have to deal with the pollution. We are at a point in time that we have reached our limits to growth. We've exceeded our limits to growth. And because there's delays and feedback loops, another thing that economics doesn't deal with well, because there's delays and feedback loops, we don't know what the future will bring, because in fact, we're living on the consumption that happened 10 years ago. And those impacts, because we've reached our limits to growth, are starting to affect us now. That's why we're starting to see crazy climate in all over the world. You can't just, all of a sudden turn on a dime, because it takes them 10 years to turn. It's sort of like you guys are taking it, you're educated now for the future. You can't have an education within a day. And so we need a major rethink of how we deal with these issues, because it's pretty much too late to deal with what we've done in the past. And so now we have to think about how we're going to fix the future, and the time's just running out. That's from a development point of view. So I really feel that if we had these models where what Cali ate more and means I have less, that's a very different model than the colonization and the wealth growth that we saw, from Adam Smith to the early industrialists. That's such a different world. The foundations of our economic principles are built on endless amounts of resources and endless places to put our waste. It's a different world going forward. And the good news is I do think that some companies are starting to really get that and make the changes to make. Well, I'll tell you, you guys hold the key. You're the ones who are going to make the difference in terms of the decisions you make, and whether you embrace the technologies and the thinking of the past, or whether you move into a new type of thinking that says that we need to recognize that there's limits to growth. Do you guys take growth theory? Do you have growth theory? Do you know what I'm talking about? Magdad, do they have growth theory?
So in macroeconomics, maybe. So we have this two kind of discussions. So basically business cycles and also long run growth. So their natural resources are unlimited, and there's always technologies can develop with R&D or like different kind of stuff that can save the day, and always there are enough environmental asset to meet the demands. So this is how it's. So natural resources over there in the growth models. So these are intermediary goods. So yeah, and they're unlimited, as you said. Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of economics is based on Penrose's model of growth theory, and that I think that's questionable now. We have to really question whether what economic models now apply when we have limits to growth, but you can't assume degrowth, and technology can't save the day. It can solve some problems, not all of them. We have till 2:30. Is that right, Magdad, or how long?
Basically, in my email, so I thought we have only 30 minutes of your time, but apparently we are going to 1:30, and I'm so glad that you were like enthusiastically continuing this discussion, and I didn't interrupt you, because I really wanted that to be more. So I thought maybe there's a time limit for you for 30 minutes that you committed to that.
I am so sorry, guys. Magda's too polite. I have an hour and a half in my calendar. I have no idea why. So here I am. Sorry for that.
No. I'm personally super happy for this discussion that we need. Mac is already showing his happiness, and I guess everyone here is so happy. This was our third live session with experts. We had two previous discussions. So the first one was with the head of innovation department in ExxonMobil, actually in Canada. So we talked.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. We did talk with those company. So how the views has changed. So they basically think that climate change is happening and they're taking actions, and they try to show this somehow. And in the second one, we have air pollution. So we talked to Nouri Najjar, like your colleague there. So
My colleague, yeah.
Yeah. So again, there the most part we talked about different governmental policies to reduce the air pollution. But this is a different kind of thinking. So always like kind of, everyone. I mean, I attended to Ivy's course, like Tima's course, 2 years ago, and completely changed my life because I switched to environmental economics. It's the closest I could get to her ideas. But yeah, so thank you very much for accepting this invitation. Thank you very much for staying longer than I was expecting. It's pretty sweet. You are the best. Actually, I really appreciate that. So usually, so if anyone has any questions, like as a last question,
just email me. Oh, last questions to ask here. Okay.
If anyone wants to add anything or ask questions, you can go for it. Otherwise, I would end the meeting here. Anyone wants to add something? All right, I cannot see.
I do have a quick one.
All right, Lauren, you're not quick all the time, but yeah, try.
Okay, so I'll keep it very short. Where do you see the future of this discourse going?
Of sustainability discourse?
Oh yeah, of corporate sustainability discourse. Yes.
Yeah, I have two answers to this. There's the optimistic answer, and I think that sustainability will start to become the heart of companies, and that we're going to really shift the business model. And I think that there's a lot of people that want to do that. But I do think that the less optimistic answer is that we're going to fall off a cliff, and that until we fall off the cliff, will we actually shift? And I tell you, I go from one to the other, and I'm really worried. I really think, quite honestly, and I'm not just saying this because it's, everybody says it, but I think that the answer really does lie in you guys' hands, not because you can change the future or you can build new business models. That's up to us. It's because if you don't mobilize, if you don't start asking questions, we won't change. And so it's really in your hands to start either softly asking the questions or more aggressively saying that you got to do something. But we need more of the Greta Thunbergs in the world, or we will stay with the status quo. I say that as a big we, but we need new thinkers. Anyway, sorry, Laurent, I don't know where you think, if you're less optimistic or more, but
two oppositions. Hopefully we'll be somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, hopefully it won't fall off a cliff. I do want to encourage you guys to take business courses, though, and it gives you a different perspective. And so it's not a sales job. I don't make any money off of this. There's no advertising here, but I do think that will complement the way that you think. So if there's ever a PhD class in your future, then take one at Ivy on sustainability. Thank you, Megda. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. So Tima, usually we ask our guests to provide 2 questions that they think could show, like people, like students here reflect on them, that could show how their mind shifted because of this session. Okay, so I really want to know. So because last session, so we kind of announcing that our course has the most active forum among the courses in economics departments, as Tim said. So yeah, so we want. So I already know what is this stage of the thinking of the students here right now. I really want to know how this new discussion that we have changed their mind, or kind of affecting the way they think. So if you don't mind, I really want you to ask 2 questions. So you can email this. I will upload this on OWL for you. So, and then the students will reflect on that. I will choose like a few of them and return it to you. So to see how this can change.
Okay, so I should ask 2 questions that you're going to upload to Learn, and you're going to tell me some of the cool answers. Is that right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, I'll do that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. You have a good afternoon or evening.
Thank you very much.
Far away. Bye.
So, bye.